You stand at a quiet crossroads just before dawn, the sky a thin wash of blue and the world still holding its breath. In the kitchen a single mug steams, beside a notebook where you've scribbled prayers and numbers in the same hand, hope and habit braided together. Lately, a message has come through like light through a cracked door, a whisper in church hymn, a line in scripture, a sudden conviction while you wash dishes. God is inviting you toward abundance, not as vanity, but as a tool to live more fully and to bless others. It feels gentle and true. It feels like permission. You remember the moment clearly, kneeling in the small quiet of your apartment or the back pew, you asked for clarity. The answer wasn't a thunderclap. It was a warmth, a nudge. Take the next step, it said. You believed. Faith, after all, has unlatched closed rooms in your life before. You feel that same trust rising now, a simple faith that doors will open, that the blessing will arrive. But there's more than longing in your chest. There's the honest ache of years, bills that stack, opportunities that slipped, the persistent question of meaning tied to money. You are in your 30s or 40s, carrying responsibilities and dreams. You want freedom, not merely for comfort, but so your life can matter on a different scale. You want to stop waiting for miracles and start partnering with them. This moment is quiet and cinematic, the street outside wakes, neighbors walk dogs, a bus sighs by. Inside, you talk to God like an old friend and also like a partner in a plan. You say, out loud or in the small theater of your thoughts, I'm ready. The promise sits in the air like a seed. If you're here, you've felt this call too. Over the next series I'll walk with you through the path from blessing to breakthrough, how to listen, how to test, and how to act. If that matters to you, let this be a moment, take a breath, like this message if it touches you, and subscribe with the bell so we continue together. Soon, the voice that nudged your heart will ask a harder question: are you willing to do what it takes? You stand at the crossroads again, dusk folding the neighborhood into long, familiar shadows. The house is quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and a stack of unopened bills on the kitchen table. Earlier that morning you prayed, a simple, earnest plea, and something in you shifted, a warmth, a quiet assurance that God had spoken about abundance. You believe. That belief feels like a door in your chest that wants to swing wide. But belief alone does not move the mail, fix the broken spreadsheet, or call the client who ghosted you. You try. You make a budget on a Sunday afternoon, you send one anxious email, you enroll in an online course at 2 in the morning. Small acts, halting steps. They taste like hope, but they do not yet produce the steady hum of progress you imagined. The gap between blessing and breakthrough begins to bruise your patience. In the coffee shop near your apartment, the barista, an older woman who knows your order and your silence, leans over the counter and says, gently, as if answering a question you hadn't voiced, prayer opens the well, but you still have to carry the water. Her words land with a soft, stubborn clarity. You find yourself defending faith and the daily grind at once, because both feel holy and necessary. There are nights when you argue with God out loud, fingers tracing the margin of that half-finished business plan. You told me to move, you whisper. I moved. Silence. Then you hear a different kind of voice, equal parts mentor, conscience, and the friend who calls you out, reminding you that devotion is not a substitute for discipline. You begin to notice the small ways you avoid risk, the projects you shelve, the phone calls you delay, the perfection that waits for permission. Each avoidance is a seed left in your pocket. A setback comes, a partnership that dissolves, a loan denied, and the lesson sharpens. Seeds left unwatered do not become harvests, even when the sky above is generous. Still, the warmth from that first message does not leave, it becomes an invitation. If you want to learn how to marry that invitation with clear, courageous steps, stay with this journey. If this touches you, give it a like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next chapter where a wiser voice asks the hard questions and offers practical ways forward. You wake before dawn, the house quiet except for the kettle clicking on. In the soft light you kneel at the edge of the bed, hands folded. The prayer comes easily, grateful, hopeful, full of that calm conviction you've carried since the first whisper of God's promise. Then you rise and the world resumes, a pile of unopened bills on the kitchen table, an inbox of opportunities you didn't answer, a savings account that seems to inch backward while your anxiety inches forward. Faith is not fragile, a voice you trust says later that morning, over coffee at a battered table in a cafe where sunlight paints the wood. It sounds like your mentor, but it also sounds like you, a steadier, firmer tone. But even fertile soil needs cultivating. You can't leave seed under a tarp and expect a harvest. You nod, because the metaphor is simple and true, and because you feel the shame of all the seeds you blessed but never tended. Scenes blur, you scrolling past investing tutorials at midnight, a half-finished business plan hidden in a folder named Someday, a conversation with a friend where you laugh off an idea that scares you. Each image is small, ordinary, yet together they map the pattern: devotion without discipline, prayer without plan. When you open your bank app, your throat tightens. When you open your journal, the pages are generous with intention and miserly with dates and numbers. There's a tender confrontation that evening, you with a mentor on a park bench, lamplight catching the rim of your coffee. "Where do you hide from the work?" she asks. You say, "I fear wasting time. I fear failing the promise." She leans forward. "Then fail as part of the work. Fail fast. Measure. Adjust. The promise isn't a parachute, it's a compass. Your hands must steer." You imagine a small experiment, set a budget, make one outreach call, schedule 2 30-minute blocks each morning for focused effort. The fear still prickles, but the map has lines now. You sense the turning, not a miraculous wind, but the first deliberate step toward steady progress. If you want the practical roadmap that pairs prayer with real habits, like this video and subscribe with the bell. Next, you will begin to craft a plan and take the first disciplined actions that turn blessing into breakthrough. Night presses softly against the kitchen window. A single bulb casts a small theater of light over scattered envelopes, a laptop with a half-finished spreadsheet, and a coffee cup gone cold. You trace a reverent line along a message you thought was from God, a whisper of abundance, a warm promise, and then the silence that follows feels heavier than ever. The faith that once lifted you now sits beside a pile of unopened bills, patient but powerless if you do nothing. A voice arrives, not thunderous, but steady, like an old friend leaning on the counter. "You prayed," it says. "That's true. What did you plant today?" You answer with the tired honesty of someone in their 30s and 40s, prayers uttered, hopes held, intentions declared. But the small tasks, the ones that look boring and humble, updating a resume, calling a mentor, learning to budget, were postponed for later, when God would do the rest. The mentor's eyes aren't judging, they are clear and kind. "Devotion without discipline is like a seed left in the packet," the voice says. Faith calls you to plant, but sowing requires hands and timing. You picture a tiny sapling in the backyard, watered once and forgotten, its leaves drooping. The image lands with a gentle thud. You have been tending the idea of prosperity more than the work that produces it. You think of the moments you flinched, avoiding calls that might lead to opportunity, telling yourself you'll learn that new skill tomorrow, shrinking from a budget conversation with your partner. Each avoidance was a small door left unknocked. Each delay was a harvest postponed. A setback cycles through memory, an investment lost because you acted out of fear, a project abandoned mid-course, and you feel the sting, but not the shame it used to bring. The mentor guides you through practical tenderness. Break the big goal into actions you can do today. Schedule half an hour to study, call one person, move $1 into a savings habit. Prayer aligns your heart, the voice reminds you. Action moves your feet. You sit up straighter, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Tonight you write one concrete step, the first line of a plan. The room breathes with possibility. If this settles in you, the mix of faith and work, of whispers and doing, stay with it. What you do next will change the story, and the next scene is where those first small acts begin to bear fruit. If this resonated, like and subscribe. There's a practical blueprint coming that you won't want to miss. Night has a way of making questions louder. You sit at the kitchen table with a Bible open and a stack of unopened bills like a small, patient storm. The lamp throws a warm circle on the page while the city hums beyond the window, traffic lights blinking like distant promises. You speak softly, the same plea you've said before, show me the way. The silence that follows feels holy and heavy. Then, not as thunder but as a careful whisper, the voice of a mentor, sometimes imagined, sometimes memory, calls you to the facts of your days. Where did you leave the seeds? Which routine did you refuse to water? You remember mornings you spent scrolling headlines instead of updating a budget, afternoons you prayed for clients instead of pitching one new proposal, evenings you begged for provision while avoiding the phone that could ask for the sale. The film lingers on these moments, thumb pausing over send, a draft spreadsheet abandoned, sweat when dialing a number. A close-up on your hand reveals calluses from hard work in other seasons, evidence that you can do the work. The missing piece is discipline now, not devotion alone. The mentor appears in fragments, an old coach at the coffee shop, a neighbor who runs a small business, a pastor who says plainly, faith calls you to act. Their words are not accusatory, they are surgical, kind. Prayer opens your eyes, one of them says, but your feet must move. You feel both comforted and exposed. Anger flickers, at God, at yourself, then softens into resolve when you realize setbacks were not punishments but wake-up calls. The crushed prospects and the midnight worries reveal patterns, avoidance of risk, fear of judgment, the habit of waiting for a miracle to do the work only you can do. In a quiet montage we watch you try again, creating a schedule, making 3 calls, sending 1 honest proposal, learning a small skill on a lunch break. Progress is uneven. The camera holds on your face when relief finally arrives, small payments, a grateful email. Hope wakes, steadier now because it rides on effort. If this scene touches something in you, stay with us, we'll show you how to shape that hope into a plan. In the next part, you will learn the concrete steps that marry prayer with practice and turn a promise into lasting prosperity. Morning light threads through the blinds, drawing thin, patient lines across the kitchen table where your prayers and bills lie side by side. You trace the edges of a worn notebook, the one where names and hopes and half-formed ideas have lived for months. The silence is generous, but inside it a conversation has been growing louder, soft at first, then insistent. A voice, not loud but steady, asks what you keep avoiding. You pray, it says, but what are your hands doing? You remember the chapel's hush, the warm weight of faith, the certainty that a blessing is near. Yet the bank notice folded under a mug, the unanswered emails, the unopened business plan whisper a harder truth: faith without form is like a garden left to rain alone. The thought is not a rebuke so much as a diagnosis. Your devotion has been fertile, your action has been sparse. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower hums, a sound that somehow feels like movement, consistent, noisy, undeniable. Inside, you rehearse every excuse you've offered yourself: not enough time, not the right skill, not the perfect moment. The wise voice returns, gentler now: what small thing, today, can you do that honors both the prayer and the possibility? It doesn't demand a grand gesture, it asks for tending. You imagine watering a seed. You picture the care of daily drops: 5 minutes to make a call, 20 minutes to draft a pitch, a single line of outreach sent before lunch. A memory surfaces: last month you prayed for clear direction and then waited for a sign instead of sending the email that could have been that sign. There is a sting as another setback replays: the client who never returned the call because you didn't follow up, the partnership that slipped because you hesitated. But alongside the sting is clarity. Devotion has primed the soil, courage and discipline must bring the water. The mentor's words land like a promise: God's messages guide your heart, your hands answer with work. You close the notebook, breathe, and write one specific step on the top line. The camera lingers on your hand as you reach for the phone, thumb hovering, ready to press call, an ordinary act that will test whether prayer becomes practice. The night is thin, kitchen light spills onto unpaid envelopes like small islands. You fold your hands until the knuckles ache and speak as if the walls could carry your prayer to the rafters: God, open a way. The words are soft, honest, faith like a candle in wind. For a moment you feel warmth, a suggestion of yes. Then morning brings the same narrow balance: rent due, emails unanswered, a proposal returned with polite rejection. The call you felt in your chest hasn't rearranged the world for you. A voice you trust, sometimes the stern, patient voice of a mentor, sometimes the quieter conscience, sits beside you at the table. Prayer is the invitation, it says. But invitations require answers. They require you to move. You can almost hear it in the scrape of a coffee cup, practical, unavoidable. You remember a garden you once tended as a child. Seeds pressed into soil seemed enough, until a week of rainless days showed you that hope without watering is only a promise to the dirt. Days fold into the rhythm of attempted devotion and hesitant action. You find yourself scripting prayers like wish lists, then scrolling at night instead of making calls. When you do act, it's in fits, an enthusiastic pitch on Tuesday, then nothing until inspiration hits again. A meeting that felt promising evaporates, the investor's smile never turns into a check. Shame curves your spine. Maybe I'm not trying the right prayer, you murmur. The mentor's reply is merciless in its care, or maybe you're not trying the right practice. You begin to map your life like a ledger. Habits show themselves: avoidance, spectacular optimism, the tiny rituals of procrastination that feel spiritual but are not. You learn to name fear, not fear of God, but fear of failure, of looking foolish in front of people you respect. You test a new honesty, telling a friend about deadlines missed, admitting you don't know everything. The admission is a small relief, like loosening a tight knot. The setback that felt like the end becomes a lesson in slow cultivation. Planting is not a single meal, it is daily tending. The idea lands with a tangible weight, faith must be married to method. So you sit down with a pen, a calendar, a trembling will, and start to draft the smallest plan you can commit to: one phone call, one spreadsheet, 1 hour a day. The plan is humble, but it is action. And as the paper fills, something that felt like resignation shifts toward resolve, preparing you for the next step where belief and work begin to walk together. You wake before sunrise, the kitchen light soft against a page of plans and a worn notebook where prayer notes and to-do lists sit side by side. The house breathes quietly, the coffee steams like a small offering. You fold your hands and speak aloud the same promise you heard months ago, that God has nudged you toward abundance. But today the prayer does not end in waiting. It moves into action. You open a spreadsheet, not in hope alone but as a faithful response, lines and numbers becoming a map for what faith asks you to water. A voice from memory, your mentor's, your own conscience, rings through: pray with courage. Plan with honesty. So you call the client you have been avoiding, draft the proposal that reflects your worth, block time on the calendar for learning and for making sales calls. Each small task is a tiny act of belief. The camera lingers on hands typing, on a calendar square crossed off, on a message ping that reads, paid. Your chest lifts for a moment, gratitude and resolve braid together. Setbacks arrive as they always do: an email that says not right now, an unexpected bill, the old insecurity whispering that this was all a fluke. You breathe, return to the notebook, rewrite the plan with adjustments instead of excuses. Night falls and you still light the lamp. Discipline is your second prayer. You rehearse offers, polish numbers, and ask for help from the community you've let sit quiet. You discover that asking is not a sign of lack but of stewardship. There are tender scenes: your partner listening at the door, a child's laugh that keeps you rooted, a mentor's short, steady text, keep the rhythm. In these moments, faith is not passive, it is a posture that prepares you to act. You begin to notice patterns. When prayer is paired with deliberate steps, doors that felt closed begin to crack open. Not all at once. Not without work. But the aperture widens. You feel the steady, growing confidence that comes from tended seeds. Hope becomes a schedule, divine whispers become deadlines you honor, and prosperity starts to look like the product of consistent, courageous action. If this resonates, stay with the story, like, subscribe and hit the bell to walk this balance between prayer and work together. The next scene will bring the first real breakthrough, and a test that will prove whether what you built can hold. Dawn comes like an answer, thin, certain light across a small kitchen table where a Bible rests next to a laptop and a dog-eared notebook. You fold your hands, speak the quiet prayers that have become your compass, And then you open the notebook not to surrender but to plan. The camera lingers on handwriting, hours blocked, calls scheduled, a tiny line item labeled seed money, and the voice inside you steadies. Prayer has not been abandoned, it has been given purpose. Outside, the city breathes awake. You make coffee, call a mentor whose voice is both patient and sharp. Faith invites you to risk, they say. Discipline makes that risk bear fruit. You listen. You type an email that has sat for weeks, no embellishments, just the truth of what you offer and the value it brings. You enroll in a course that feels expensive and essential. You set up a budget that honors both bills and bold bets. Each small decision is a bead on a rosary of action, consistent, intentional, reverent. Not everything yields immediate reward. A potential client postpones, a payment clears late, an old fear surfaces when the bank balance blinks lower than you'd like. You feel the tug to return to passive waiting. Instead you call the accountant, you rework the proposal, you knock on one more door. In the evenings, prayer returns, not as a consolation but as a partnership with the labor of the day. Thank you for guidance, you murmur. Now help me keep showing up. Slow progress begins to show in quiet ways, a recurring invoice paid on time, a small investment that returns enough to fund the next month's experiment, a conversation that leads to a collaboration. Those moments are modest, but they rearrange your expectations. Faith still lifts your sight, action builds the staircase. You are learning a new rhythm, pray, plan, act, repeat, and it feels like coming home. The promise is no longer a distant whisper but a daily practice. If you want the exact routines and scripts that turned prayer into steady progress, stay with me. The next part maps the steps that produced real breakthroughs. If this touched you, leave a like and subscribe, ring the bell so you won't miss the habits that transform blessing into breakthrough. The morning light slips through the blinds as you sit at the kitchen table a little longer than usual, the Bible open beside a laptop, a mug cooling near a stack of bills. Prayer still feels like the first, truest thing you do, hands folded, voice low, a hush that makes the world seem possible. Yet the silence that follows has a shape now. It isn't empty, it's expectant, waiting for something you haven't given it, consistent movement. A knock comes at the door of your resolve in the form of a mentor's question, soft but relentless, what will you do with the answer? You remember the conversation in the park last week, the bench half warmed by the sun and the way his eyes held steady when you confessed your fear of failure, of taking a tidy life and making it messy with brave, uncertain steps. He leaned forward, palms open, and said, faith is the compass, effort is the map. It sounded simple then, now it's a call to the small daily courage you haven't practiced. You start with one thing, a budget that's not a punishment but a promise. You list true priorities rather than excuses. It stings to confront habits, late subscriptions, unclaimed hours, the comfort of waiting, but each tiny honesty is a prayer answered by action. That afternoon you walk into a community space to teach a short workshop on skills you've always loved but never monetized. Your hands tremble when you set up the projector, an old doubt whispers that nobody will come. They do, 3 people, then 7, then a cluster of faces that mirror your hunger for meaning and money that sustains life. You stumble through the first lesson and then, to your surprise, you find rhythm. Someone in the corner asks a practical question about pricing. You answer, imperfectly, and the exchange becomes a seed. At night you journal not only petitions but plans, call on 2 leads, learn 1 new tool, wake an hour earlier to write proposals. Each line is both prayer and contract with yourself. There are setbacks, an unpaid invoice, a rejected pitch, but their weight is lighter because you've learned to pair surrender with strategy. You begin to see prosperity not as a miracle bestowed on the passive, but as the harvest that comes when faith waters disciplined work. If this stirs you, consider how prayer has been calling you to move. In the next part we'll watch how these deliberate actions gather into momentum, and how the smallest courage can open a door you thought only God could. If this touched you, like and subscribe, and hit the bell to walk the last steps together. You stand at that quiet crossroads again, but this time the light has changed. Morning pours through the kitchen window, a soft fidelity that feels like an answer. Your hands cradle a worn notebook where prayer threads meet to-do lists, where scripture and spreadsheets sit side by side. You remember the first whisper, God's message that abundance was possible, and you remember the long season of waiting, the prayers that felt holy but fruitless. Now the wise voice you met along the way comes back, not as judgment but as steady counsel. Prayer is the map, action is the footsteps. You repeat it aloud, tasting each word like a vow. Outside, the city hums, vendors setting up, a bus sighing, someone sweeping the stoop. Inside, small rituals mark your new discipline, a morning prayer, 30 minutes of focused planning, a call to a mentor, a budget revisited with honest eyes. There are setbacks still, an invoice delayed, a fear that resurfaces at night, but they land softer because you meet them with both faith and craft. You plant seeds and you water them. You phone a client instead of hoping an email will be enough. You pivot when the plan doesn't fit reality. Little victories accumulate, a steady client, a savings milestone, the unclenching of your chest when you talk about money like it's a possibility, not a curse. A moment of quiet confession works itself free, you will still stumble. You will still pray through the ache of impatience. But you no longer use prayer as a pause from life, you use it as fuel for the work that follows. In the glow of late afternoon you close your notebook, count the small wins, and whisper thanks, not because everything is finished, but because you can see the road widening under your feet. If this resonates, promise yourself one small act today, send that email, make that call, open that spreadsheet. If we have walked with you, give this story a like that carries the weight of your own hope, subscribe to keep receiving practical steps and weekly encouragement, and tap the bell so these messages arrive when you need them. Tell us in the comments, do you pray and act, or does fear hold you back? Your next step starts at dawn.